The confrontation that followed happened faster than anyone expected. As the arena walls continued pulsing with distressed bioluminescent patterns, the sounds of conflict echoed through the ship's corridors. Jake could hear weapons firing and voices shouting in the Vextani language. The crew was tearing itself apart over the revelation about the Mawjif. War Commander Zextal drew his sidearm, a weapon that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. This ends now. The human dies, the Mawjif returns to its duties, and order is restored. But before he could fire, Sub-Commander Veltara stepped between him and Jake. No, we need to understand what we have learned here. If the human speaks truth, then everything we believe about our empire is wrong. The empire's strength comes from the Mawjif, Zextal snarled. Without them, we are nothing. The empire's strength comes from lies, Veltara shot back. From the enslavement of intelligent beings. Is that what we want to be? The Mawjif beside Jake made a series of complex sounds that were clearly directed at Veltara. She listened carefully, her 4 eyes widening as she understood more of what the creature was trying to communicate. It says the others are awakening, she translated. The chemical suppressants are wearing off because the ship's biosystems are in distress. They can think clearly for the first time in years. Nancy Brooks' voice came through Jake's communicator with urgent news. Captain, we're getting reports from throughout their ship. The other Mawjith are behaving differently. They're not responding to commands, and some of them are actively helping Vextani crew members who support the rebellion. Rebellion? Jake asked. Kyle's voice joined the transmission. About half their crew has sided with Sub-Commander Veltara. They're demanding an end to the Mawjith program and a complete restructuring of how their empire operates. The arena shook as something heavy impacted the ship's hull. Through the organic walls, Jake could hear the distinctive whine of spacecraft engines. Amy's voice crackled through the communicator. Captain, we're reading multiple ships approaching. It looks like other Vextani vessels are responding to distress signals from this ship. Zexto smiled grimly. The fleet comes to restore order. Your human tricks will not save you from the full might of the Empire. But Veltara was shaking her head. You don't understand. If what's happening here spreads to the other ships, if their Mawjith also begin to awaken, the entire fleet structure will collapse. As if summoned by her words, the arena's walls began to iris open in multiple places. Other Mawjith entered, moving with a grace and purpose that Jake had never seen before. These creatures weren't hunched and submissive like the one he had first met. They stood tall, their multiple eyes bright with intelligence, their movements coordinated and deliberate. Behind them came Vextani crew members, but not as handlers or controllers. The aliens and the Mawjith were moving together, communicating through a combination of sounds and gestures that spoke of genuine partnership. Impossible, Zexto breathed. The Mawjith cannot organize themselves. They cannot lead. One of the newly arrived Mawjith approached Jake. This one was smaller than his original companion, with lighter coloring and more delicate features. When it spoke, its sounds were clearer, more structured than the halting attempts at communication he had heard before. Veltar listened intently, then turned to Jake with amazement. This one says it is the eldest of those aboard this ship. It has been pretending to be docile for over 30 years, waiting for a chance to free its people. Its people? Jake repeated. The Mawjith are not just individuals, Veltar explained. As more of the creatures entered the arena, they are a collective intelligence. Each one is smart on its own, but together they form something greater. We have been enslaving not just individuals, but an entire civilization. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. The Vextani hadn't just been using intelligent creatures as weapons. They had been suppressing an entire species collective. Consciousness for generations. Dr. Chun's voice came through the communicator. Captain, I'm reading incredible neural activity from all the Mawjith on the ship. They're linking their minds somehow, sharing information at a rate that shouldn't be possible. They're planning something, Jake realized. the eldest Margith made another series of sounds, and Veltara translated. It says they do not want revenge, even though they will be justified in taking it. They want freedom for themselves, and an end to the cycle of conquest and enslavement. And if we refuse, Zextal demanded, all the Margith in the arena turned to look at him. The combined weight of their intelligent gaze was more intimidating than any display of teeth or claws. Could have been. The eldest one spoke again, its words clear and deliberate. It says they will no longer pretend, Veltara translated. They will no longer be weapons. Without them, the Vextani Empire cannot continue its expansion through intimidation. We have other weapons, Zextal insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Do we? Veltara asked. Our ships are bioorganic, bonded with Margith consciousness. Our weapons are grown using biotechnology that requires their participation. Our entire civilization has become dependent on their cooperation, and we never realized it because we thought they were just smart animals. Rick Santor's voice crackled through the communicator. Captain, the approaching fleet is slowing down. I think they're having the same problems this ship is experiencing. The awakening is spreading, Jake understood. As the Margith on each ship regain their full consciousness, they're affecting the biosystems throughout the fleet. Nancy added her report. Sir, I'm monitoring communications between the ships. There's a lot of confusion and conflicting orders. Some commanders are trying to suppress the awakening, but others are calling for negotiations. The arena had filled with both Vextani crew members and Margith, but instead of the tense standoff Jake had expected, he saw something remarkable happening. The two species were talking to each other, really communicating for perhaps the first time in decades. Young Vextani warriors were listening with obvious shock as Margith told them about their experiences. Older crew members who had worked closely with the creatures were beginning to understand that their partners had been aware and suffering all along. Veltara moved to the center of the arena and raised her voice to address everyone present. We stand at a crossroads. We can try to maintain the old ways through force and continue to build our empire on the suffering of others, or we can choose a different path. What path? One of the warriors called out. Partnership, Jake said, stepping forward. True cooperation between equals. The Margith don't want to destroy your civilization. They want to be part of it as themselves, not as enslaved weapons. The eldest Margith made a long, complex statement that Veltara translated piece by piece. It says the collective has knowledge that could benefit both species. They understand biotechnology in ways we never imagined because they've been connected to our ships and systems for so long. They could help us become something greater than either species could be alone. Zextal looked around the arena at the mixed groups of his own people and the awakened Margith. His shoulders sagged as he finally accepted what he was seeing. And if I refuse to accept this new order, then you'll be left behind, Veltara said simply. The universe is changing, and we can change with it or be swept away by it. Jake approached the war commander carefully. There's another option. You could help lead this transition. Your people respect you, and the Margith don't want revenge. They want cooperation. For a long moment, Zextal stared at Jake with awe. 4 eyes. Then he looked at his Margith, the creature that had been his ship's primary weapon for over a decade. The beast looked back with patient intelligence, waiting to see what choice its former captor would make. Why aren't you trembling, human? Zextal asked quietly, echoing the question that had started this entire encounter. Jake smiled. Because I'm not afraid of what we might become together. The war commander slowly holstered his weapon. Then let us discover what that might be. The silence in the arena stretched on as everyone stared at the Margith. The creature stood protectively near Jake, its massive form no longer hunched in the submissive posture it had maintained before. For the first time, it looked like what it truly was, not a mindless weapon, but an intelligent being who had been forced to play a role. Dr. Lisa Chen's voice crackled through Jake's communicator, breaking the tense quiet. Captain, I need to share what Amy and I have discovered. The bio readings we're getting are extraordinary. Go ahead, Jake said, keeping his eyes on War Commander Zextal, who looked like he was struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Margith isn't just intelligent. Amy's voice joined the transmission. Based on the brain scans, it's as smart as we are, maybe smarter. The neural complexity is incredible. But there's something else, something that changes everything. What is it? Jake asked. There are traces of memory suppression drugs in its system, Dr. Chun explained. Chemical compounds designed to limit higher brain function and enhance aggressive responses. They've been dosing this creature to keep it docile and manageable. The Margith turned its head toward Jake's communicator as if it understood every word. Its large eyes showed a flash of something that looked like hope, mixed with fear. There's more, Amy continued. I've been analyzing the biosignatures from the other areas of their ship. Captain, there are at least 12 other Margith aboard that vessel, and they're all showing the same signs of chemical suppression. A younger Vextani warrior stepped forward from the viewing area. Unlike the others, this one's posture showed uncertainty rather than anger. What are they saying? She asked. What do these readings mean? Jake looked up at her. They mean you've been lied to. Your people haven't been using weapons in their conquests. You've been using slaves. Lies, Zextal snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. The Margith are beasts. We created them to serve the Empire. You modified an existing species, Jake corrected. But you couldn't change their minds, so you drugged them instead. You turned thinking, feeling beings into tools of war. The young warrior who had spoken earlier jumped down from her perch and landed near them. She was smaller than the others, with lighter coloring that suggested she might be younger. I am Sub-Commander Veltara. I want to understand what you are claiming. Jake gestured to the Margith beside him. This creature has been pretending to be a mindless killer, because that's what it was forced to do to survive. But look at it now. Look at how it behaves when it's not being threatened or drugged. As if to prove his point, the Margith lowered its head and gently nuzzled Jake's shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably affectionate, like a dog seeking comfort. From its owner, Veltara stared at the display with all four of her eyes. This is not possible. I have seen the Margith in battle. They are savage, relentless. They show no mercy. Because they're terrified, Jake said. Think about it from their perspective. They're intelligent enough to understand that they're being used as weapons. They know that if they don't perform, they'll be punished or killed. So they do what they have to do to survive. Nancy Brooks' voice came through the communicator. Captain, I'm monitoring communications throughout there. Ship, there's a lot of agitated chatter. It sounds like word of what's happening in the arena is spreading. What kind of chatter? Jake asked. Confusion mostly. Some of the crew are asking questions about the Margith program. Others are demanding that the trial be stopped immediately. Zextal strode toward Jake and the Margith, his clawed hands clenched into fists. Enough of this madness. The trial will continue. The Margith will fulfill its purpose. But when he approached, something unexpected happened. The Margith didn't cower or submit as it had been trained to do. Instead, it stepped in front of Jake and looked directly at the war commander. Its multiple mouths opened, but instead of roaring, it began to make a series of complex sounds. It's trying to talk, Jake realized. It's actually trying to communicate. Veltara moved closer, her head tilted as she listened to the creature's attempts at speech. Those sounds, they're similar to our ancient language, the one we used before. We developed modern Vextani. You mean it learned your language? Jake asked. More than that, Veltara said, her voice filled with growing horror. If it knows the old tongue, that means the Margith have been listening to us, understanding us, for generations. They've been aware of everything we've done to them. The implications hit everyone in the arena at the same time. These weren't just intelligent creatures being used as weapons. These were beings who had been conscious and aware throughout decades of enslavement and abuse. Amy's voice came through the communicator, again urgent now. Captain, I'm reading massive biosignature changes throughout their ship. The other Majith are responding to what's happening in the arena. Their stress levels are dropping, but their neural activity is spiking. They know, Jake said quietly. Somehow, they all know that one of them is finally free to be itself. Kyle's voice joined the transmission. Jake, you need to see what's happening out here. The Vextani crew is splitting into factions. Some of them look like they're ready to mutiny. Through the arena's organic walls, Jake could hear the sounds of heated arguments and running feet. The revelation about the Majith was tearing apart the crew's unity. This is sedition, Zextal declared. But he was backing away from the Majith now. The Empire's authority cannot be questioned. Your empire is built on slavery, Jake said. On the suffering of intelligent beings who were forced to become monsters against their will. Veltar was staring at the Majith with a mixture of fascination and growing guilt. How many worlds surrendered because they thought they were facing unstoppable beasts? How many civilizations gave up without fighting because they believed the Majith were mindless killers? All of them, Jake said. Your entire expansion was based on a lie. You weren't conquering through superior strength or technology. You were using terror tactics backed by enslaved intelligence. The Majith made another series of sounds, more complex this time. Veltar listened intently, then turned to Jake with wide eyes. I think it's asking for help. Not just for itself, but for the others. Can you understand what it's saying? Jake asked. Some of it. The old language was more musical, more like what it's producing. I think it's saying something about freedom and about pain ending. Rick Santo's voice crackled through the communicator. Captain, their ship systems are going haywire. I'm reading power fluctuations throughout their vessel. It's like the ship itself is responding to something. The ship is partially biological, Amy explained. If the Majith have been integrated into its system somehow, their emotional state could be affecting the ship's functions. Suddenly, the arena's walls began to pulse with different colors. The bioluminescent patches that had been providing dim light started flashing in complex patterns. Jake realized he was seeing the ship's equivalent of an emotional breakdown. The ship is alive, he said with sudden understanding, and it's connected to the Majith somehow. Veltara nodded slowly. The bioships bond with their Majith. We thought it was just a control mechanism, but if the creatures are truly intelligent, then your ships have been feeling their pain for decades, Jake finished. The entire Vextani fleet is built on a foundation of suffering. The war commander looked around the arena as the walls continued to pulse with distressed patterns. His warriors were looking at him with uncertainty, waiting for orders that he seemed unable to give. What have we done? Veltara whispered, and in those 4 words, Jake heard the beginning of a revolution that would change the Vextani Empire forever. The arena aboard the Vextani ship was nothing like Jake had expected. Instead of a high-tech combat facility, he found himself in what looked like a massive organic cave. The walls curved inward like the inside of a rib cage, and the floor was covered with a spongy material that felt alive under his feet. Bioluminescent patches provided dim light that cast strange shadows everywhere. War Commander Zexto stood on a raised platform that grew directly from the wall. Other Vextani warriors occupied similar perches around the arena, their 4 eyes gleaming in the weird light. Jake could see Nancy and Kyle watching from a viewing area that had been grudgingly provided for the human observers. The trial begins now, Zextal announced, his voice echoing strangely in the organic space. Captain Morrison, you have 1 full cycle to survive. When the Majith enters, it will hunt you with all its predatory instincts. There is no escape, no mercy, no hope except to endure until time runs out. Jake stood in the center of the arena, wearing his standard uniform with no additional protection. He had refused the ceremonial weapons the Vextani offered, bringing only a small emergency kit and his communicator. The decision had puzzled his host, but Jake had his reasons. Section of the arena wall began to iris open with wet, organic sounds. The Maugith emerged slowly, its 6 legs moving with careful precision on the spongy floor. In the dim light of the arena, the creature looked even more imposing than it had in the cargo bay. Its purple-black hide seemed to absorb what little light there was, and its multiple mouths opened and closed in a rhythm that might have been breathing. The Vexthani warriors leaned forward in anticipation. This was the moment when their ultimate weapon would demonstrate its power, when the human would finally show the terror that every other species had displayed. Instead, Jake sat down cross-legged on the arena floor. The Maugith stopped moving. Its massive head tilted to one side, and its large dark eyes focused on the human who had just made himself completely vulnerable. The creature took a tentative step forward, then stopped again. "Why do you not run?" Zextal called out, confusion clear in his voice. "The hunt has begun. You must flee or fight." Jake looked up at the war commander. "Why would I run from something that doesn't want to hurt me?" "It is a Maugith," one of the other warriors shouted. "It lives only to kill and consume. It knows no other purpose. Does it?" Jake asked, turning his attention back to the creature. The Maugith had moved closer, close enough that Jake could have reached out and touched one of its legs. But instead of attacking, it was studying him with what looked like curiosity. Jake slowly reached into his emergency kit and pulled out a ration bar. He unwrapped it carefully, making no sudden movements. The sweet smell of processed fruit and grains filled the immediate area. The Maugith's nostrils flared. Its head lowered until it was just a few feet from Jake. The captain could see into its primary mouth, past those impressive teeth to the modified digestive system that Amy had analyzed. But he could also see something else in the creatures. Eyes, intelligence, awareness, and something that looked very much like loneliness. "You're not really a predator, are you?" Jake said softly, speaking directly to the Maugith. "You're just pretending because that's what they want you to do." The creature made a sound that was part whimper, part sigh. One of its smaller side mouths opened and closed, but not in a threatening way. It was almost like the creature was trying. To speak, Jake broke off a piece of the ration bar and held it out. "Here, I bet you're hungry." Really hungry, not fake predator hungry. The Maugith looked at the offered food, then up at the watching Vexthani, then back at Jake. Very carefully, almost delicately, it extended what looked like a tongue from its primary mouth and took the piece of ration bar. The arena erupted in shocked voices from the watching aliens. Zexto was on his feet, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "This is impossible." The Maugith does not accept food from prey. It hunts, it kills, it feeds. That is its nature. "Maybe that's just what you forced it to become," Jake said, offering another piece of ration bar. The Maugith took this one more eagerly, and Jake could hear what sounded almost like a purr coming from deep in its chest. Kyle's voice came through Jake's communicator. "Captain, Amy's been analyzing the bio readings from this whole encounter. You need to hear this." Jake tapped his communicator. "Go ahead, Amy." Amy's excited voice crackled through the small speaker. "Jake, that creature's brain patterns are going crazy right now. The stress hormones that were elevated before are dropping fast, but its higher brain functions are lighting up like a Christmas tree. It's not just intelligent, it's highly intelligent. Maybe more intelligent than we first thought." "What are you saying?" Jake asked, still maintaining eye contact with the Maugith. "I'm saying that creature has been suppressing its own intelligence to survive. The Vexthani have been conditioning it to act like a mindless predator, but it's actually a sophisticated thinking being." The Maugith seemed to understand that they were talking about it. It moved closer to Jake, lowering its massive body until it was lying down like a giant cat. Its head was now at Jake's eye level, and he could see a depth of intelligence in those dark eyes that was unmistakable. "How long have you been pretending?" Jake asked the creature directly. "How long have you been acting like a monster when you're really not?" The Margith made a complex series of sounds that were clearly attempts at communication. Its side mouths opened and closed in patterns that looked almost like sign language. Zexto jumped down from his platform, landing heavily on the arena floor. "Stop this! The trial continues. The Margith must hunt. It must kill. That is what it was created for. Created?" Jake stood up slowly, the Margith watching his every movement with concern rather than predatory interest. "You created this species?" "We modified them," another Vextani warrior called out. "We took a simple herbivore species and made them into the perfect weapons. We enhanced their size, their teeth, their digestive systems. We trained them to be killers." "But you didn't change their minds," Jake realized. "You couldn't change what they really are inside." The Margith looked up at the Vextani warriors with what Jake now recognized as fear. Not the fear of a dumb animal, but the complex fear of an intelligent being who understood its situation and felt helpless to change it. Jake reached out slowly and placed his hand on the creature's massive head. The skin was warm and surprisingly soft. "It's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to pretend anymore. Not with me." The response was immediate. The Margith pressed its head against Jake's hand and made a sound that was pure relief. Its side mouths opened and closed in what looked like sighs of contentment. "This is sacrilege," Zextal snarled, moving toward them. "The Margith serves the Empire. It has no other purpose." Jake stood up and stepped between the war commander and the creature. "It has whatever purpose it chooses. That's what intelligence means." "The right to choose. It is a weapon," Zextal insisted. "It was made to inspire fear and obedience." "It's a person," Jake said firmly. "A person you've been torturing into being something it's not." The Margith rose to its feet behind Jake. For the first time since entering the arena, it looked truly dangerous. But its anger wasn't directed at the human who had shown it kindness. It was looking at the Vextani who had forced it to live a lie. The creature opened its primary mouth and roared. But this wasn't the performance roar it had been trained to give. This was the sound of years of suppressed rage and pain finally finding a voice. It was the sound of an intelligent being who had been treated like a tool finally saying no. The arena fell silent, except for the echoing remains of that roar. Jake could see fear in the eyes of the Vextani warriors for the first time. They were finally seeing their weapon as it really was, not as they had forced it to appear. "The trial is over," Jake said quietly. "But I don't think this is ending the way any of us expected." War Commander Zextal paced back and forth in the cargo bay like a caged animal. His four eyes kept darting between his Margith, which was still lying peacefully while Amy Peterson ran her scanners over it, and the humans who showed no signs of the terror he expected. The other Vextani warriors stood in formation, but Jake could see confusion in their postures. This was clearly not going according to their usual script. "This is intolerable," Zextal finally declared, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "No species has ever shown such disrespect to the Vextani Empire. You mock our power with your casual behavior." Jake stepped forward with his hands open and empty. "We're not mocking anything, Commander. We're just trying to understand. On Earth, when we meet someone new, we try to learn about them. It's not disrespect, it's curiosity." "Curiosity," Zextal repeated the word like it tasted bad. "You should be cowering before my Margith. You should be begging to join our empire before we destroy you. Instead, your female examines my war beast like it is some pet." Amy looked up from her scanner. "Actually, the readings are really interesting. This creature has been bioengineered extensively. The original base species was probably much smaller and definitely herbivorous. Someone has modified its digestive system and added those impressive teeth, but they kept a basic gentle temperament. It's like putting fangs on a cow." The Mawjif made a soft rumbling sound that almost sounded like purring. One of its smaller side mouths opened and closed, showing rows of sharp teeth. But the gesture seemed more like yawning than threatening. Kyle, Davis pushed himself away from the cargo container he had been leaning against. You know what I think? I think this whole show is just that. A show. Big, scary monster. Tough talk about conquest, all designed to make people surrender without a fight. It's actually pretty smart. Dr. Lisa Chun nodded from where she stood beside Amy. The stress hormones in the creature's system suggest it's been conditioned to perform this intimidation display. But look at its body language now that it's not being forced to act threatening. Classic signs of a social animal seeking companionship. Zextal's mandibles clicked together rapidly. You dare to analyze our methods? You dare to suggest that the might of the Vextani Empire is mere theater? Not theater exactly, Jake said carefully. More like diplomacy through intimidation. It probably works really well on most species. But humans, well, we're kind of weird that way. The more scared someone wants us to be, the more we want to figure out why. Engineer Rick Santos spoke up from his monitoring station. Captain, I'm reading elevated stress levels from all the Vextani warriors, not just their creature. Their heart rates are up, their body temperature is rising. They're the ones who are scared here. Nancy Brooks turned from her communications console. Sir, I'm monitoring their ship systems through the docking connection. They've powered up their weapons, but their targeting systems keep cycling. It's like they can't decide what to do. Zextal heard every word, his 4 eyes fixed on Jake with what looked like desperation mixed with anger. You will show proper respect for the Vextani Empire. I challenge you to prove your species' worth in combat. The cargo bay fell silent, except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Jake felt his crew tense behind him, but he kept his voice calm. What kind of combat? Single combat, Zextal declared, his confidence returning now that he was back on familiar ground. Your champion against mine, with my Mawjith as witness and judge. If your warrior wins, we will consider treating your species as equals rather than subjects. If your champion falls, your ship will be destroyed and your people marked for conquest. Jake glanced back at Kyle, who straightened up with interest. The sergeant was easily the best fighter on the ship, trained in multiple combat disciplines and enhanced with military augmentations. But something about this situation felt wrong. What exactly would this combat involve? Jake asked. Your champion enters the arena with my Mawjith, Zextal explained. They must survive for one full cycle while the beast hunts them. If they live, they win. If they die, your species loses everything. Amy stood up from beside the Mawjith, her scanner still in her hand. Wait a minute. You're talking about putting someone in an enclosed space with this creature and letting it hunt them? Yes, Zextal said proudly. It is the ultimate test of courage and skill. No species has ever survived the trial. Dr. Chun frowned. That's not combat. That's just feeding people to an animal. There's no skill involved, no chance for the human to fight back meaningfully. The Mawjith is the perfect predator. One of the Vextani warriors spoke for the first time. To face it is to face death itself. Kyle laughed, actually laughed, out loud. Perfect predator? That thing? It's got 6 legs that are too long for its body, which means it's probably clumsy. Those big teeth make it top-heavy. And Amy just told us it was originally a plant eater, so its hunting instincts are probably terrible. The Mawjith lifted its massive head and looked at Kyle. Instead of snarling or showing aggression, it tilted its head to one side like a curious dog. See? Kyle pointed at the creature. It doesn't even know how to look threatening properly. Zextal's 4 eyes blazed with anger. You insult the greatest weapon in our arsenal. Very well. Since you show such confidence, you will be the one to face the trial. No, Jake said firmly. If anyone faces your trial, it will be me. I'm the captain of this ship. His crew immediately protested. Nancy stood up from her station. "Captain, you can't. We need you to command the ship." "Jake's right, though," Kyle said. "This isn't really about fighting. It's about understanding what we're dealing with, and he's better at that than any of us." Amy was still studying her scanner readings. "Captain, I'm getting some very strange data from the Mojave. Its brain patterns are much more complex than they should be for a simple predator. There are structures here that suggest higher intelligence, maybe even self-awareness." "What are you saying?" Dr. Chun asked, moving to look at the scanner display. "I'm saying this creature might be a lot smarter than anyone realizes," Amy replied. "Smart enough to understand that it's being used as a weapon. Smart enough to be unhappy about it." Zexto stepped between Amy and the Mojave. "Enough of your analysis. The challenge has been issued and accepted. We will prepare the arena aboard my ship. Your captain will face my Mojave in 1 standard hour." The war commander and his warriors began moving toward the airlock, but the Mojave didn't follow immediately. It looked back at Amy and made that soft rumbling sound again. Then it looked at Jake with what seemed like sadness in its large dark eyes. "That's not the look of a mindless killing machine." Rick observed quietly. Dr. Chun was already pulling up files on her medical console. "I need to run some analysis on Amy's scanner data. If that creature is as intelligent as the reading suggests, this whole situation is different than we thought." Jake watched the Mojave finally follow its handlers toward the airlock. The creature moved slowly, almost reluctantly, and kept looking back at the humans. "Nancy, open a channel to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "Send them everything we have on the Vextani and their creature. If this goes badly, they need to know what humanity is dealing with." "Already on it, Captain," Nancy replied, her fingers flying over her console. "Kyle, I want you to review everything we know about animal behavior," Jake continued. "Something tells me this trial isn't going to be what the Vextani expect." "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Kyle asked. Jake nodded as he watched the last of the aliens disappear through the airlock. "That creature isn't the real weapon here. The fear it's supposed to inspire is the weapon. And if we're right about its intelligence, it might not want to be a weapon at all." The airlock sealed with a final hiss, leaving the humans alone in their cargo bay. But Jake could feel that everything had changed. In 1 hour, he would face a test that no species had ever survived. The question was whether he was walking into a fight or something else entirely. The stars looked different out here on the edge of human space. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship New Horizon and watched the unknown vessel approach through the darkness. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of his ship, with strange curved surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hull had an organic quality that made Jake think of giant bones or insect shells. "Captain, they're sending a signal," said Communications Officer Nancy Brooke from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. This was humanity's first contact with an alien species, and nobody knew what to expect. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered, and then showed a face that was definitely not human. The alien had pale gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its elongated skull. When it spoke, its voice came through the universal translator as a deep growl. "I am War Commander Zextile of the Vextani Empire. You will prepare to receive me aboard your vessel. I come to determine if your species is worthy of joining our domain or if you will be conquered like all the others." Jake glanced at his crew. Lieutenant Amy Peterson stood at the science station, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was studying the alien ship's readings with the focus. Intensity she brought to every problem. Sergeant Kyle Davis leaned against the weapons console, his muscular frame relaxed despite the threat they face. Dr. Lisa Chun sat at her medical station, already pulling up files on alien biology. Engineer Rick Santos monitored the ship's systems from his post near the back of the bridge. "We welcome the opportunity to meet," Jake replied diplomatically. Our docking bay can accommodate your shuttle. The alien's four eyes narrowed. I do not travel in shuttles like some merchant. You will extend your docking tube to my ship. And human, when I board your vessel, you will show proper respect. I bring with me my Morgith. One look at this creature has caused entire planets to surrender without firing a shot. The transmission ended. Nancy looked up from her console with raised eyebrows. Well, that was friendly. Amy, what do your sensors tell us about their ship? Jake asked. The young lieutenant frowned at her displays. It's definitely organic technology, Captain. The hull appears to be grown rather than manufactured. I'm reading multiple life signs, but there's something strange about one of them. It's much larger than the others, and its biosignature is unlike anything in our databases. That must be the Morgith they mentioned, Dr. Chun said. Some kind of war beast, perhaps. Many species throughout Earth's history have used animals in warfare. Kyle pushed himself away from the wall with a grunt. Sounds like they're trying to intimidate us before we even meet. Classic bully tactics. Maybe, Jake said, but we need to be careful. This could be a cultural thing. What seems like aggression to us might be normal behavior for them. 20 minutes later, the docking tube connected with a solid thump that echoed through the ship. Jake and his senior staff waited in the main cargo bay, which had been cleared to serve as a meeting space. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the strange atmosphere that leaked through the connection. The airlock cycled open with a hiss. War Commander Zexto stepped through first. He was even more imposing in person, standing nearly 8 feet tall with long limbs that ended in clawed hands. His gray skin had a leathery texture, and his four eyes moved independently as they scanned the cargo bay. Behind him came 6 other Vextani warriors, all carrying weapons that looked like a cross between rifles and organic growths, but it was the creature that followed them that was supposed to inspire terror. The Morgith was roughly the size of an earth elephant, but its body was all wrong. It moved on 6 legs that bent at impossible angles, and its hide was a deep purple-black that seemed to drink in the light. The most disturbing feature was its head, which was mostly mouth. Rows of teeth lined the maw that could easily swallow a human whole. Smaller mouths opened along its flanks, revealing more teeth and what looked like digestive organs. Jake heard Nancy take a sharp breath behind him, but none of his crew backed away. Amy actually stepped forward slightly, her scientific curiosity overriding any fear. Kyle didn't even straighten up from his casual lean against a cargo container. ZEX single quotes. Tall waited, his 4 eyes focused on Jake, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. When none came, confusion flickered across his alien features. I am Captain Jake Morrison, Jake said simply. Welcome aboard the New Horizon. The war commander's mandibles clicked together in what might have been irritation. Do you not see my Morgith, human? Do you not understand what stands before you? Amy tilted her head and walked closer to the creature, pulling out her scanner. Fascinating. The bone structure suggests it evolved from a hexapodal ancestor, but the digestive system has been heavily modified. Are those secondary stomachs along the sides? The Morgith turned its massive head toward her. For a moment, Jake tensed, ready to order his people back. But the creature just watched Amy with what looked like curiosity rather than hunger. You examine my beast as if it were some common animal in your zoological gardens, Zexto snarled. This is a Morgith. Entire worlds have surrendered at the sight of one. Warriors have thrown down their weapons and begged for mercy. Kyle yawned audibly. Yeah, it's big. So are elephants. So are blue whales. Size doesn't automatically make something scary. Dr. Chun stepped up beside Amy, her medical scanner active. The muscular development suggests it's primarily designed for intimidation rather than actual combat efficiency. Very interesting evolutionary adaptations, though. Zexto's 4 eyes swiveled between the humans. His warriors shifted nervously behind him, clearly as confused as their commander by the lack of terror their ultimate weapon was producing. You do not tremble, Zextal said slowly. All species tremble when they see a Mawjith. The Corellians wet themselves. The Zentari fell to their knees. The Blix simply fainted. Why would we tremble? Jake asked genuinely. It's just an animal. A very large, very interesting animal, but still just an animal. Just an animal? Zextal's voice rose to a shriek. This beast can tear through starship. Hulls with its claws. Its acid can dissolve bone in seconds. One word from me and it will consume you all. Amy looked up from her scanner. Actually, based on these readings, I don't think it could get through our hull. The claws look impressive, but they're hollow, probably for display. And that's not acid. It's highly concentrated digestive enzymes that would work great on organic matter, but wouldn't do much to metal. The Mawjith made a sound that was almost like a whimper. It lowered its great head and looked at Amy with what could only be described as a hopeful expression. Poor thing looks hungry, Kyle observed. And kind of sad. Rick Santos spoke up from his position near the wall. The bio readings show elevated stress hormones. Whatever this creature is, it's not happy. Zexto stared at them all as if they had grown extra heads. You analyze it. You discuss its emotional state. You show no fear whatsoever. How is this? Possible? Jake shrugged. We're human. We see something new. We try to understand it. Fear doesn't help with understanding. The war commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. His warriors exchanged glances that suggested they were as bewildered as their leader. This was clearly not going according to their plan. You will show proper respect, Zextal demanded, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. I am a war commander. Of the Vexthani Empire, I have conquered 17 worlds. That's nice, Jake said politely. Would you like some coffee? We were hoping to have a conversation about peaceful relations between our species. The alien stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked at his Mawjith, which was now lying down and letting Amy run her scanner along its hide. The creature seemed to be enjoying the attention. This is not how first contact is supposed to proceed, Zextal muttered, more to himself than to the humans. Maybe that's the problem, Jake suggested gently.